So my name is Jan. I'm a flower grower and florist and an artist, and during the summer I have a flower field full of flowers, and in the winter I'm more about connecting with the landscape around me. My business is based actually on the Somerset Devon border. All my inspiration really is from the environment, sustainability, and really reflecting the beautiful countryside that we live in my work. I really love this time of year. Once I've got over the fact that the flowers have died, that the frost has killed the last of the dahlias, I'm really happy to start thinking about all the winter projects. A lot of the wreaths that I make are from foraged materials. For me, foraging is actually as much about observation of nature and all its forms and colours and textures as it is about the gathering. So when I'm foraging, I'm on a walk basically, and I'm just immersing myself in all the beautiful shapes and silhouettes that you get, all the lovely bare trees, and you can see all these wonderful structures and the way that maybe a tree is bending in the away from the wind, or the way that a birch tree might have some beautiful hanging hair-like strands with these gorgeous catkins on the end. So I'm constantly observing and enjoying shapes and silhouettes. So today what I wanted to do was take you on a walk really, and show you some of the things that I like to pay attention to, and hopefully inspire you to go out and do the same sort of thing. Talked a little bit about looking at the kind of structures that are out there and the silhouettes, and one of the things I love doing is looking up into trees, and you get the shapes between the branches as much as the shapes of the branches themselves, and the light that filters through. To me, that's really exciting. So looking up, but also looking down. There's amazing things down here. So, for example, just literally under my feet, there's this gorgeous moss. It's really green and tactile, and a beautiful texture as well as colour. And actually, if you look really closely, it's a bit like a tree. It has ferny nature as well. So it's almost like the macro and the micro. While we're talking about the forest floor, I think it's worth mentioning something about some of the different kinds of lichens, because I love incorporating it into a wreath. It's usually on quite a brittle branch. So one of the things that I'm always looking for is shapes that will lend themselves to the shape of the wreath, the circle of the wreath. And that's just beautiful because it's got that lovely arch to it. And as a florist, this is what you're doing all the time really, when you've got your arrangements in mind. It's like looking for the dahlia that's going kind of out to the side when you want something to come forward in a vase at you. It's the same idea really, which is why I love growing flowers really, because the ones that you would buy from the wholesale markets, usually the imported ones, that's a whole nother story, but they are very uniform and straight up and down, and actually what we want is this is just perfect. think it's worth mentioning something about being a responsible forager, because in this moss is a whole ecosystem. Creatures live in here. We need to respect it as a habitat as much as anything. And even under fallen leaves and bits of old rotting wood, that's what's feeding this beautiful tree. This isn't about taking as much as we possibly can from nature. It's about enjoying it and understanding it, and also being responsible, I suppose, and thinking about sustainability. So for example, berries. Berries are amazing. Look at the colours, the red against the green. That's such a Christmassy sight, isn't it? It's something that we associate with the festive season, that beautiful pop of red. But of course, this is food for the birds. So we need to really remember that. So please don't go and take all the holly berries from the holly trees. However, I did notice that there's a little bit of holly on the floor here. So I think we could probably have that and put that in our basket and use it as part of our wreath that we're going to make later. We're looking at this beautiful mossy bank here, and it's quite amazing because there are probably at least 5 different kinds of moss in this area, and it's really stunning and beautiful, and the textures and the different colours of each moss are really beautiful. That is gorgeous. That is called tamarisk moss. I love the way that the moss has continued up these branches as well. That is just stunning. You get that in these Somerset Devon woods where it's really damp and the moss actually covers the whole trees, and they're like green velvet. Really beautiful. And it's the kind of thing that I really love to reflect in a wreath or a piece of work. I mean, I just found this stick, it's just a stick on the floor, and it's got a lovely mossy and licheny end to it. Again, it's the sort of thing that to incorporate into a wreath is really beautiful. The other thing that I've noticed here is a lovely wild honeysuckle, which is actually great for making. This piece is loose, but it's a great material to make a base with. So you can make the actual ring with the honeysuckle vine, and it's already kind of twisted for you as well. That's one of the things that I love. I've got one that I made in my studio actually a couple of years ago, and it's still going strong. It's got lots of dried things on it, like honesty and dried flowers and berries that just seem to have lasted. I wanted to mention is the lovely dead bracken, because I love the shapes, the ferny silhouettes that you get, and if you pick it a little bit earlier when it's still got that kind of yellow colour, and put it with the brown stuff, it's a really lovely thing. And also incorporate it into a wreath. So we've looked down at the moss, but I wanted to look up as well, because we're we're underneath this lovely hazel, and it's that time of year when it gets these beautiful green early catkins, and they're just lovely textural things and perfect for incorporating into a wreath. So this is a gorgeous silver birch, and I love it because you get those gorgeous dark branches that silhouette against the sky, and then on the end of them are the beautiful birch catkins, which are sometimes quite golden at this time of year. Right next to this birch is a hazel, which is being invaded by this ivy. So there's this lovely trailing stuff, and then at the top you've got all the fruiting ivy. So eventually it will topple if it's not taken down by its owner. So one thing to think about is, if you know people who have land and are managing that land, you know, they're often maybe chopping trees down in order to manage the woodland. So, you know, that's a good source of material, really. And I use a lot of this from my trees. I just drape it over the beams in my house. I'm lucky to have beams, I know. It's only a little house. I drape it over, and it's a lovely Christmas deck with a bit of fairy light going through it. But you can also use it in a wreath. Fruiting ivy, and nubby ivy in fact. So what we mean by nubby is that you get these kind of branching bits that are coming out from the main branch, and they have beautiful leaf formations on them, and you can use that as a foliage as well as a texture, because you've got the lovely seed heads. Now these seed heads are, or the fruit I should say, they will go the most wonderful bulbous green. I call it the bobbly bits in my classes. That's a technical term. And then of course they go black, and those are also amazing. So those are things to look out for. Thing to remember, it is nectar for bees and other beneficial insects. So again, just be responsible, don't take the whole lot, leave some for the wildlife. We're standing under this absolutely magnificent fir. It's huge, actually. Fir is obviously very festive, and it provides, I mean, there's so many different kinds of fir, aren't there? They give wonderful texture and colour, and you know, it's really worth paying attention to the differences, because they will bring variety to the piece that you're working on in a very lovely way. I mean, some people will make whole wreaths just of fir. Personally, I like to break it up with something else and bring in other elements, but you can do all sorts of things with a fallen fir branch. Beautiful area of the woods down by the river, where it's all very damp and boggy actually. And in here is the most wonderful sphagnum moss, and this is perfect for making a wreath. Even if you just use a small amount, so you get the lovely green. The thing about moss is it is the most amazing ecosystem, and in here are microscopic organisms like nematodes and other beneficial organisms, bear that in mind as you're using this amazing material, and to think about foraging responsibly. So I'm going to use a bit of this in the wreath that we're going to make today, because it's absolutely beautiful. It's really soft and textured. There's lots of different greens in there, and it's going to hold the moisture really well. So I'm going to enjoy using that. So I've just stumbled upon what I call absolute treasure, which is a whole larch tree that's been felled. And look, I've found all these gorgeous sprays of cones with lovely moss and lichen all over them. And honestly, these are just so amazing in a wreath. I have made whole wreaths just of these cones because I love them so much, and they lend themselves so beautifully to a wreath with lots of lovely bits winging out. Even just the bobbly, branchy bits I think are beautiful. So we're definitely going to incorporate these in the wreath today. We're in the kitchen garden, and we're looking at herbs, and here we've got a lovely branch of rosemary, which smells amazing when you crush it. Now, if you're making a fresh foliage wreath, this is great. It doesn't actually last that long, but it will dry out and it will still give the scent that you get when you crush rosemary. Bay, lovely evergreen bay, brilliant for not just culinaries, but in a vase with some flowers any time of year, in a vase with other foliage, and in a wreath. So I use this a lot. It is a brilliant, long-lasting foliage. Beautiful, beautiful crab apples. Now, the thing about crab apples is they look amazing on a wreath, and the colour and the shape, well, they're just delightful, aren't they? However, you'll notice that this tree has very few left. So by Christmas, pretty much the crab apples are gone, and I don't use anything imported, so I haven't yet found a way of preserving them.